They almost called the whole thing off. Not once. Not twice. But so many times that the people making Stargate in 1994 genuinely stopped believing it would ever reach a single movie screen. The director had been laughed out of every major studio in Hollywood. The lead actor had been secretly reading the wrong script for months. The guy they hired to play the villain never actually wanted the job. And the magical portal that became one of the most iconic images in science fiction history? It was born inside a garage using iced tea powder, a wooden stick, and a drill. This is the story that the polished posters and the box office numbers never told you. And once you hear it, you will never watch Stargate the same way again. Let's start with something that almost nobody knows. Before a single camera rolled, the entire project was homeless. Every major Hollywood studio looked at the script and said no. They told Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin the same thing over and over again. Science fiction is dead. Nobody wants this. Move on. But Emmerich and Devlin refused to let it go. So they did something almost unheard of for a film that big. They raised all $55 million themselves, completely independent from any studio, calling in every favor and knocking on every door until the money was there. And even then, the only reason the movie got a release date was because MGM happened to have an empty slot sitting on their calendar. It wasn't a deal born from excitement. It was a deal born from convenience. Studio executives actually assumed the budget would balloon past $100 million. They could not believe two filmmakers were promising to deliver something that enormous for $55 million. When a movie not only stayed on budget, but went on to earn over $71 million in the United States alone, those same executives who had said no were suddenly very quiet. But long before any of that money came in, there was the problem of Kurt Russell. The filmmakers knew they needed his name badly. Without a major studio behind them, foreign buyers were not going to gamble on an unknown cast. Russell's reputation was their ticket to getting the film financed. There was just one problem. Every time they sent the script his way, he said no. For a long time, nobody could figure out why. It turned out the answer was embarrassingly simple. Russell had been given an early draft, a rough version of the script that was never meant to leave the writer's desk. Every time he read it, the story felt weak and the characters felt thin. So he passed without giving it much thought. When the filmmakers finally figured out the mix-up and got the real shooting script into his hands, something changed almost immediately. Russell looked up from the pages and said something like, "This isn't so bad at all." That small sentence unlocked everything. The producers came back with a $7 million offer, which was a massive piece of a $55 million budget. Once his name was attached, the whole project gained the anchor it needed. And on October 28, 1994, Stargate opened at #1 at the box office with a $16.6 million weekend. The gamble had paid off. Now here is where the story gets even stranger. While Kurt Russell was making peace with the project, his co-star James Spader was doing the exact opposite. Spader told Entertainment Weekly with complete honesty that he thought the script was awful. He had just come from serious, well-respected films and found himself in a career moment where the paycheck mattered more than the material. But here is the part that surprises people. He said the badness of the script actually fascinated him in a weird way. He was drawn to it, almost like you are drawn to watching something go wrong in slow motion. Still, that fascination did not stop the frustration from building. Spader clashed constantly with Emmerich and Devlin over the dialogue, pushing back whenever a line felt lazy or cheap. While Russell had long accepted the reality that not every film would be great art, Spader was still in the middle of that internal battle where his standards kept fighting with his bank account. One afternoon, the whole production froze because of it. Spader refused to come out of his trailer. He told the crew the pages needed to be rewritten, and he was not moving until that happened. Every minute of delay cost money. Crews stood around waiting. Cameras sat idle. Emmerich and Devlin grabbed pens and started rewriting dialogue on the spot just to get things moving again. Then Russell, who had quietly watched all of this, had enough. He walked straight to Spader's trailer and demanded to know what was happening. Spader fired back and asked him directly to just admit the truth. The dialogue was horrible. Russell did not flinch. He did not argue. He just looked at Spader and said something that became the most legendary line spoken off camera during the entire production. Of course it's horrible. That's why they pay you $1 million. If it was brilliant, you'd do it for free. In one sentence, Russell summed up 20 years of understanding how Hollywood actually works. And Spader had no answer for it. Now, while all of that drama was happening in front of the cameras, something just as wild was going on behind them. The Stargate prop itself, that massive 22-foot ring that became one of the most recognizable images in movie history, almost looked completely ridiculous. The first time the crew finished building it and set it under studio lights, they stepped back and stared. It looked like a giant Goodyear tire, completely flat. No depth, no mystery, no sense of alien power, just a big black rubber circle sitting on a stage. Producer Dean Devlin later said it had absolutely no texture, and instead of feeling ancient and otherworldly, it felt cheap and heavy. They knew the entire movie was resting on this prop looking powerful and believable. So in a move that could have gone terribly wrong, they repainted the entire ring metallic silver between shooting days. When the lights hit it the next morning, everything changed. The silver surface caught floodlights and torches and bounced the reflections across its surface in a way that made it shimmer like something both ancient and advanced. That overnight decision became the visual identity of the entire franchise. The silver gate with glowing symbols appeared on posters and in sequels and on television screens for years. Without that rushed fix, the movie might have been laughed out of its first test screening. And speaking of things that almost destroyed the movie, let's talk about the portal effect. The swirling liquid surface of the Stargate that made audiences gasp in theaters did not come from a Hollywood special effects studio. It came from a garage. After Emmerich had already rejected every idea the visual effects team brought him and had actually fired VFX supervisor Jeffrey Oken, Oken refused to give up. He and cinematographer David Stump retreated to a small garage with a plexiglass tank, filled it with water and iced tea powder, and stuck a wooden beam attached to a drill into the mix to create a swirl. When the swirl settled, the spiral pattern at the bottom was exactly the kind of strange, organic shape they had been searching for. Oken then remembered something from film history. Mercury tanks had once been used to create mirror effects in older movies. So he filmed the underside of the water surface from a tilted angle. That strange choice captured the liquid shimmer that became the heart of the portal. But they still needed the explosive burst, the moment the gate activates and water shoots outward before pulling back into a vortex. Someone found an air mortar and fired it into the tank at 26 pounds of pressure. The entire block of water launched out of the tank and completely soaked David Stump from head to toe. They lowered the pressure all the way down to just over 2 pounds, fired again, and finally captured that perfect explosive burst followed by the receding vortex that audiences would never forget. When Oken brought the footage to Emmerich fully, expecting to be fired again, the director watched it and grinned. He told Oken it was fantastic. Years later, the television team making Stargate SG-1 tried to recreate the same effect. Not knowing the original pressure settings, their first attempt used 50 pounds. Water shot across the entire room and destroyed the equipment. It took them weeks of trial and error to finally match what two guys had figured out in an afternoon inside a garage. Now, let's talk about the man inside the golden costume. J. Davidson had absolutely no intention of becoming an actor. He was a fashion assistant working in London when someone noticed him at a party in 1991 while he was laughing and having a good time. He had been working with designers who created clothing for Princess Diana and had zero plans to step in front of a camera. Then director Neil Jordan cast him in The Crying Game without even asking him to audition. His performance earned him an Oscar nomination. He showed up to the 1993 ceremony wearing riding breeches and thigh-high boots because he dressed exactly how he felt and did not care what anyone thought. Even after all that sudden fame, he said he hated it and was already planning to return to fashion before the award season had even finished. When Stargate producers came calling in 1993, Davidson wanted to turn them down without being rude about it. So he came up with what he thought was a foolproof plan. He asked for $1 million, A number he believed was so outrageous they would simply walk away and the whole thing would be over. They agreed on the spot. Suddenly Davidson had to make a movie he never wanted to be in. That single paycheck ended up being one of the defining financial moments of his career. What finally made the role feel real to him was the costume. Designer Joseph Porro created something extraordinary for the character of R.A. There was a velvet robe layered in purple and turquoise with shimmering panels of metallic fabric, a leather vest carved with Egyptian symbols, an enormous cape that swept behind him with wooden and metal panels decorated with sculpted cobras, a fiberglass headdress set with lapis lazuli and tiger eye stones at the forehead with hanging red resin panels on copper bars. When Davidson saw everything assembled and put it on for the first time, the craftsmanship finally connected with something he genuinely respected. The role stopped feeling like a paycheck and started feeling like art. But working with him was anything but smooth. His personal assistant vanished on the second day of filming, taking his phone, his cash, and his medication with him. Davidson was shaken, and the stress rippled through the production for days. Delivering dialogue was a struggle throughout filming, so the crew gave him large cue cards with words spelled out phonetically. Test audiences saw the early cut and responded poorly, wondering why the hero did not simply overpower such a weak-seeming villain. The filmmakers went back into the editing room, added a fiery glow to Ra's eyes, rebuilt the voice using pitch shifts and layered sound effects, and rewrote the character entirely as the last survivor of a dying alien race. When Devlin met with Davidson before the film came out to explain all the changes, he found him calm and sober. Davidson told him that those edits had saved him because he had genuinely believed he had ruined the whole movie. He had not. In fact, the strange and unsettling quality Davidson brought to the role accidentally invented one of the most important ideas in the entire franchise. R.A. was never written as an alien. He was supposed to be a human serving a higher alien power. But Davidson's unusual presence pushed the filmmakers to invent the idea of an alien parasite controlling a human host. And that single creative decision became the foundation for the entire Goa'uld mythology that drove years of television storytelling. Out in the desert near Yuma, Arizona, the production faced an entirely different kind of survival story. Temperatures climbed past 120 degrees Fahrenheit and refused to drop. Plastic water bottles melted if someone left them sitting in the sun. Crew members buried their drinks in the sand just to keep them cool enough to swallow. Cameras overheated and jammed. Film stock warped. People collapsed from heat exhaustion almost every day, and paramedics stayed on location because everyone knew it would keep happening. The actors inside the Horus Guard helmets suffered the worst of it. Those helmets were heavy rubber molded over plastic frames, with no eye holes and no air circulation. The small battery-powered lights inside made the heat even more intense. Performers could barely breathe. To get through shooting days, the crew worked in narrow windows, starting just after dawn and stopping before the afternoon heat became truly dangerous. And because the budget could not cover hundreds of real extras, the crew came up with something wonderfully strange. They built stick figures, dressed them in cloth robes, and planted them in the background of crowd scenes. From a camera distance, they looked exactly like villagers and workers. Nobody in the theater noticed. For the final battle sequence, they brought in roughly 1,200 real extras who ran up and down sand dunes in heavy robes under the Arizona sun, then blended them with the stick figures in the back and green screen additions around the edges to make the crowd feel enormous, without spending money they did not have. Stargate was a movie that should not have worked. The studio doors slammed shut. The budget should have been double. The lead actor almost never read the real script. The villain never wanted the role. The portal was invented with kitchen ingredients. The prop almost looked like a tire. And a fashion assistant who asked for an impossible salary accidentally created a mythology that would outlast everything anyone involved ever expected. 30 years later, people are still talking about it. And now you know exactly why.